Hey there, I am Melanie Nnogo. I have been a techie since I came out the womb, basically. From customizing my Black Planet page, because you know that had to be fire, to launching enterprise software for a Fortune 5 company. I have done it all in the tech space. And now I'm building for myself and helping others along the way. So, welcome to the 5 Credit Startup, where I'm building real companies in public using ChatGPT, Lovable, and other tools and with the product manager's mindset. So let's get into it. I actually started this episode yesterday, had a few technical difficulties. So I'll just do a real quick recap of what we touched on. I touched on my career, why I'm doing all of this, my beliefs around generational wealth, and how entrepreneurship is one of the avenues as to how you can get there. And it's the avenue that I've chosen. And then what I want for this channel, which is essentially to inspire other people who have dreams of getting into tech, building tech companies, and may feel that they don't have the time, the resources, or what have you. My goal with this channel is to reduce the psychological barriers that get folks that look like me, that keep folks that look like me from making these things happen. So I talked about my framework and how I approach even before I start coding anything, how I approach just thinking about a new product. And so, real quickly, I'll recap that. Before I build anything, I work through 5 things. So, first is the problem. What are these users actually experiencing? You might already have a solution in mind, and that's great. But what you want to do is be able to listen, to talk to and listen to the market to get a better understanding of what the deeper rooted problems might be. Two, you want to understand the users, how many types of users will be coming to your platform. Sometimes, if it's a simple platform, there's just one user that you're focused on. Sometimes, and especially in this day and age with everything being so connected, there's multiple users and user types that you need to design for, problem solve for, and make sure that their experience is unique enough to them and what they're on your platform to do. Then you have outcomes or solutions for each and every one of those user types. So, why are they there? What is the problem that they're facing? And then, what is the value that they're actually deriving or they're looking to derive from being on this platform of yours? And then 4 is the journey. So, understanding how they experience or flow through your platform, being as specific as possible as far as, first step, they're able to do this. Second step, they're able to do that. Third step, they might self designate into one of 2 avenues. What happens if they go Avenue A? What happens if they go Avenue B? So, you want to be able to map out and outline as much of that as possible. And then 5th is where you start talking about features. Now, a lot of the founders that I work with, they'll come with a laundry list of features that they just believe has to be in their platform in order for it to be successful. And as founders, that's great. We're visionaries. We think about what the future could look like. But also, as a technologist, I know you don't want to bog down your platform with a bunch of features. You confuse users, you inflate costs unnecessarily. So, there's a reason why you want to be as judicious and as careful with picking your first set of features as possible. You want to use all of the information that you gathered in steps 1 through 4 to determine what is the minimum amount of features you need to incorporate in order to introduce your product to the market, and then you can always grow from there. So, notice I mentioned that features are last. Most people start with features. I start with understanding. Now, you can be like a Google who will whip something up really quickly and throw it out into the market and see how it goes. They have the time, they have the resources, the people, the money to be able to do that. I think their platform, Google Plus, is a good example of that. They threw it out as a social media type of platform to see how it would do. They only got a few million users, which to them was not a success. And then they decided to, can the whole thing, and they just write it off as the cost of doing business. But for folks that look like me, who don't have millions and billions of dollars to test and try things out, uh, you have to have some sort of system, some sort of process for understanding what increases your odds to get to success, right? Okay. So I explained this in the part one of this video, but I am building in public my nonprofit. It's called A Broad Impact Collective. However, a client just came in. She happens to be my mother, but a client nonetheless. And I just went through this whole process with her in a couple of days. Um, and so what I'll do is toward the end of the video, we'll talk about this first. Toward the end of the video, I'll show you real life examples of each of these areas, how I did it. And then next week, we'll start getting into actually building AIC. Now, I also want to mention, you're going to hear wild and crazy noises. I am living in Nigeria right now. So I also live like 20 minutes away from the airport, so apologies for all of that. But there's cars and gates and buses and whatnot coming around. If you can't hear, sincerest apologies. Don't worry. I have a microphone and all that stuff to improve my setup. I'll do that eventually, just not quite now. And then also, if you see the lights flicker on and off, that just means that they took electricity. The electric companies do as they please around here. And I don't have the ability to get up and go and turn on our backup generator and all that stuff. So just want to kind of context set before we jump into this. Okay, so for identifying the problem, using AIC, my nonprofit, as an example for this, the problem isn't necessarily just that people need a donation platform. There are billions of donation platforms that exist, and plenty of nonprofits that bring money to the continent, Africa. And then there are also plenty of companies that if you just want to send money, you can send money. A few that I know my family members use, Lumfi, World Remit, and a couple of others. Back in the day, Western Union used to be the thing. I think some people still use it, depending on the demographic you're sending money to. All of that is fine, it's existing. But if you think about it from that perspective, you're thinking about it as I need a solution, or that's a solution, right? You're saying people need a donation platform, and that is a solution that you're bringing to the market. Versus the actual problem is that many Africans abroad already send money. They're already supporting members financially, family members financially. They're already sending money, they're already helping, but the process is often informal, it's difficult to track, and it's disconnected from larger community impact. That is the problem. So the reason I wanted to start AIC was because I saw my mom, my aunts, these are like the user base that I'm keeping in mind. They send money home all the time, not always for just emergencies, like a funeral or something medical related. Sometimes it's because they have friends and family that need school fees paid, or they just had a baby and they need, support in, getting things ready for, bringing that kid into the world. All of those things that they do, or the money that they send, is extremely altruistic. But I always look at it as there has to be a way for you to benefit from that somehow. They send the money, in my opinion, and just looking at the context in which I grew up, which is Nigerian culture. For those that make it out of Nigeria, get to the US, get to the UK, get anywhere in Europe, abroad, essentially, there's almost a sense of responsibility and maybe even a little bit of sense of guilt in wanting to make sure they support the people that help them get there, or the people that they know are still living in conditions that aren't ideal economically. And so from as long as I can remember, my mom and her siblings have been sending money home. And I think about, I'm glad that they do it from a philanthropic standpoint, but I see other folks and how they do it, and they generally find a way to get a tax break in the money that they use for philanthropically. So that's where 2 and 2 kind of came together for me. How can they continue to do this, but then also have some level of financial advantage for themselves? So that, for me, is the problem that I'm going after. And for me, that is exciting because when you can clearly explain your problem in one or two sentences, and I mean that in literally one or two sentences, sometimes I speak to founders and 10 minutes later they're still explaining the problem and why they're, in the space that they're in. Um, so it's so important to be able to whittle it down into one or two sentences. For me, I know I'm going somewhere. I know I'm good. So that is understanding or identifying the problem. Now, empathizing with users and how I go about that, you have to ask who you're building for, right? So if I think of AIC and use AIC as an example, there are three user groups. First, you have the donors. So in my mind, that is my mom, that is my aunts, people that are abroad and already have an idea of who they want to send money to on the continent or in Nigeria, which is where we're starting. There's the recipient, so the family member, friend, what have you, that is on ground or in Nigeria that is receiving the money. And then there's the administrator, so me and my team, who are essentially acting as the middleman, collecting donations from abroad and then dispersing those funds in Nigeria locally. Each, as you can imagine, of those user groups have different goals, different experiences, are looking for different outcomes. A donor, they want confidence and transparency. They want to know that the money that they're providing to the nonprofit is going to the cause that they've designated it for, right? Um, they want to be able to see at the end of the year how much they've donated so that they can, if we could potentially provide them with a document, send it over to their accountant to be able to take advantage of the tax deductions that are available to them to then increase how much they're able to spend in the next fiscal year. If you think about recipients, they want support, but they also want support with dignity, right? Not many of these folks are looking for a constant handout. We're in fact focused on what we would consider like the middle class, right? Not what you see on, give $1 a day and you'll feed a child, like not that level of poverty, where it's a consistent crutch, or consistent need, I should say. We're focused on the folks that, they're working hard, they're earning their daily bread, but it may just not be enough. The economy here in Nigeria is not very great at the moment. There's little to no economic mobility if you are middle class. And so, anything, a heart attack or a medical event could take you out of the game for 6 months, and now you don't have money to pay your children's school fees or things like that, right? So, our funds are for people who need catalytic funds to be able to get from point A to point B, get back on their feet, get the ball going, get ahead just a little bit so that they can, continue to maintain that pace. And so that's how we're looking at that user group. And then the third are the administrators. So me and my team, we want accountability, we want efficiency, but we also want compliance, right? Because this is a very tricky field to be in. Nonprofits can't necessarily be one to one, right? So while I think about my mom and her, giving money to a specific person in mind, a nonprofit can't necessarily operate in the same way exactly. So how do we ensure that buckets of money that are being distributed, by category, education, medical, emergency, et cetera, are still reaching and flowing to the people that need it based on, prior existing relationships? Got to think about all of that. So understanding and deeply empathizing with the user, is required. And now I'll go back to the piece about founders and talking to users. For some reason, it's the scariest part. Not for some reason. I understand. I actually empathize and understand why it's the scariest part. Bringing a new technology business to life, to the market, is actually a very vulnerable position to be in. The idea of having people critique what you're doing, not understand what you're doing, offer you opinions that might counter your assumptions, All of that, uh, you gotta put your pride aside. You gotta put your ego aside. You have to be open to being able to hear that, because that's the only way you can truly build for the people that you're intending to build for. It's even more tricky when you are of that community, right? I am both Black and Nigerian, Black American and Nigerian, born and raised in the US, now living here in Nigeria just to deepen my roots, you can say. But that doesn't necessarily make me the expert on all things Black American or all things Nigerian. Actually, it makes me quite ignorant to both sides, because I only know and understand my own perspective. So therefore, the products that I'm building, the things that I'm doing, I still need to get out and talk to people about them, because they offer me other ideas, other positions, other problem perspectives that I may not have considered in the first place. And I saw this come to fruition working with my development team, because we are a US based company, but a lot of my developers work and live here in Nigeria. And in building Rialto the first time around, there were a lot of different perspectives that I got in trying to understand how to go about building this thing. And it just made the product and the process that much more enriched because I had outside perspective. So all of this to say that it is important, even though you may have assumptions in understanding how these users are feeling or what their needs are or what their goals are, it's still important to still validate that. And by validate that, I mean talk to them, whether it's market research through a survey, which is still kind of a cop out, or direct interviews. If you're building B2B, like a product that's businesses working, selling to businesses, then you want to at least interview 10 to 20 of them. If your product is a B2C, as in everyday individual users could potentially use it, you want to talk to at least 100 to 200 of them, right? Because that's still a very small microcosm of who might actually be on your platform. So yeah, that I won't belabor the point, but it's extremely important to make sure you talk to your users so that you can understand and get a deeper level of understanding. So if you don't understand your users, your product becomes a collection of random features, and that's not fun for anybody. Okay, so targeting outcomes. This is where most founders skip ahead. I ask, what changes if this works? What changes in their life? For the donor, success might mean feeling confident about where their money goes. For the recipient, success might mean getting support faster, or even increased support, because instead of relying on a specific family member, now you're relying on a system, on an entity, an organization. So instead of getting $50, because you didn't want to bother that person, or that they're just managing their paychecks, you may now be able to ask for $500, which order of magnitude larger, and lets you be able to plan and do more things with those funds. And then for the organization, AIC, success might mean increased participation and measurable impact, which is, all we hope to do, to be able to do more, and make things more efficient for both the donors and the recipients. So you want to keep outcomes focused on results instead of functionality. So we have not yet talked at all about how any of this happens. We've only talked about what needs to happen. What are the experiences, or the feelings of these users? Now we start talking about, we get into the product side of things, right? So exploring the user's journey, that's where you start thinking about, okay, how do the users experience this platform? What happens first? What happens second? What happens third? Now, for me, my process for doing this is visual. Um, I don't have one here, but back when I was living in Oakland, California, best time of my life living in Silicon Valley for 6 years, I had me a 6x4. I'm pretty sure it was that big, glass whiteboard. And I was all too happy to get up there, use my little color coded markers to start mapping out user journeys. Had my little boxes for my flow chart, for each user, right? So the donor would have one, the recipient would have one, administrative team would have one, and you're mapping out, okay, they come to the main page. What do they click on? They click on something that enables them to create an account, or they are able to make a donation and then create an account. So you want to think through what is their experience on this platform. And then a little bit later, I'll talk about how all of this process differs when you're working with a human development team versus with AI products, because it is a bit different, working with humans versus working with AI. So yeah, going back to the example for AIC, maybe a donor joins, they make a contribution, maybe they're able to refer a participant, maybe they're able to receive updates, maybe they're able to receive or download tax documents. You want to start thinking through what those things are and how they look. Not how they look visually, but how they look process wise in that diagram. Then, so that's the journey. And then if you think about it, products are really just journeys. And if you have a clear idea of the journey, right, you have a clear idea of their outcomes, what they're looking to do, you have a clear idea of the users that are on the platform, and you have a clear idea of, what was the first thing again? The problems that they're facing and why they're even coming to your platform. Then, and only then, do you get to start talking about features. Because now you're not guessing. Now you're not saying, oh, well, we need this, and I think we need that, and I think we need this. If you're saying, I think, you haven't done enough research. And I urge you to go back to the drawing board, quite literally, to get a better understanding of whatever it is that you're missing. So the previous 4 sections, if you've done enough work, the features write themselves because you have an understanding of, okay, this user is coming to the platform to be able to do this thing and to be able to, at the end of the day, see this thing. That writes out feature 1, that writes out feature 2. Yeah. Because now every feature serves a purpose based on the research and the conversations that you've had. Now, also be mindful, right? You can't let one user shape your whole platform. So you might, if you're doing this right, you're having conversations about this product and this platform with multiple different types of users in quantity. If one person says, oh, it'd be really nice if this platform did X, Y, and Z, you need to validate that with some of the other folks that you talked about. Don't let one person's opinion have you build out a whole feature just for that one person to be using and no one else finds interest or value in it. So it also gives you the opportunity to be clear in how you build these features. So instead of saying, I want a dashboard, you can say, I need a dashboard because donors need visibility. And you can write that with more specificity than you would have before. Instead of saying, okay, this dashboard could have metric 1, metric 2, metric 3, you actually have a list from the donors, potential donors you've talked to about what they care to see, and you just implement that versus guessing what they're looking for. Notice how that's 2 different conversations, right? So, okay. So those are the 5 in detail kind of steps I take before ever entering into Lovable. And this is where I'll talk about the approach versus working with humans versus AI, because back in the day, I won't even say back in the day, because mind you, Lovable for me is an MVP tool. You build out the first version of your platform. MVP is minimum viable product. What are the most minimum basic features that you need to take to market to be able to start to validate your platform, which is get users to start paying, get feedback, right? That is the validation of your platform. Each platform, I believe, will have some level of, will reach a certain point before it needs to move into a custom built application. So this is not to say that you will never work with developers again. It is to say that the first step, which a lot of investors or funding organizations look for, Is this something that people actually want? And you do that through building an MVP, building something quick and dirty, getting it to the market, testing things out, getting money, getting users, getting feedback. And then you can go back to the investor and say, hey, yes, we have 10,000 users on this platform, but we've outgrown the environment that it's in right now, and now need funds to be able to custom build it and stretch it even further. So it's important to understand what this process looks like working with humans versus working with AI. So, with working with humans, I mentioned earlier that my development team, based here in Nigeria, while I was in the US for the vast majority of Minwell, my first company's existence. And I always loved, for example, I could bring a user story, right? As a product manager slash scrum master, I could bring a user story to the team. It could be something as simple. Let's use a dashboard as an example. As a donor, I want a dashboard that shows me how much I've donated throughout the year, right? It's a specific functionality that in my head means point A, point B. Dashboard shows how much they've donated in the year, period. And then for additional clarity, you add an acceptance criteria so that when you're talking about it with your development team, it minimizes scope creep or additional things and features that they want to build. But it never failed to amaze me just how, in my mind, straightforward a user story could be. But you bring it to your sprint planning, or you bring it to your backlog grooming, and all of a sudden, all these other things are coming into play. And if you're not careful, right, especially if you don't have a tech background, especially if you call yourself a non-technical founder, you're being led down a path where what's supposed to be a simple functionality implementation turns into a multi-sprint, multi-quarter implementation, because people just have different perspectives, right? And so working with humans, your number one goal outside of understanding the platform, the product, the users, and all those other things, your number one goal is to make sure that it is clearly understood and there's no room for interpretation. So there's a document, it's called a PRD, a product requirements doc, that a lot of devs, freelancers, dev shops will require, which is essentially all of those things that I just talked about in great detail, using mockups where you can, using examples where you can, using comparables, other platforms that are similar to what you're trying to build where you can. All of that is to make sure that they 100% understand what it is exactly you're looking to build, which requires a lot of work. A solid PRD could take anywhere from a couple weeks to a couple months to develop, because you're having these conversations, you're having these conversations, you're documenting these conversations, you're whittling down what makes sense, or what's high priority versus what's lower priority, um, and getting time for requirements gathering and all of that. It's a large process and it can take time. And I will always recommend, after the handoff of the PRD, having multiple conversations, whether they're recorded or use AI summaries, multiple conversations with the developer or the dev shop or whoever you're working with, to make sure that they can reiterate back to you exactly what you're looking for. It helps you save time, it helps you save money, because as they start building, when it comes to changing things later down the road, it just takes more time and it takes more money. So the more clear that you and they can be upfront, the less likely for wasted time, wasted money, wasted effort down the road. Now, in the world of AI, they do a lot of the thinking and assuming for you, which for me as a product manager, building MVPs, I have no problem with that. I remember when we were building Rialto the first time around, we spent so much time agonizing over the brand of Rialto, right? From the colors to the font to the iconography to the look and feel and all of that. It was so important to us to make sure that we built a platform that felt user intuitive and friendly because we were building it for our community, Black folks, and understanding how we interact with technology or don't interact with technology. Wanted to make sure that visually the platform reflected that. And I would say we were successful with that. However, it took us entirely too long to get there. And so now, while that is still important to me as far as the visual aspects of the platform, I realize that that's secondary, right? If no one ends up using the platform, spending all that time worrying about colors and buttons does not matter. So now I can give AI a general one or two line about what the look and feel and brand of the platform should be. And honestly, whatever it spits out, I'm kind of okay with, because again, this is just testing things out, testing the market, seeing how people respond. And if it ends up becoming a big deal, then we can go back to the drawing board and say, you know what does the brand of this platform actually need to be? What does it actually need to feel like? Do we care about the fonts? Do we care about the buttons? Do we want custom icons? We can have those discussions later. What the world of AI has done and enabled is removing a lot of the bloat and removing a lot of the wasted time, effort, energy so that you can get in there and actually see how things are going. So, when it comes to using AI to build an app, you don't necessarily need a 15-page PRD. I'll show you, I'll start sharing my screen here in a second. What I used was like a page and a half, just kind of high level thoughts. Put that together. I took it to ChatGPT because Chatty, she tends to be like a developer, and has like shiny ball syndrome. If you give something like a seed to a developer, all of a sudden they're trying to blow it up and do all these other things. And sometimes you gotta be like, hold on, I love your ideas. Let's pick and choose. And that's exactly what I did with Chatty on. So I went to Chat. I said, hey, I'm about to build this app in Lovable for this client. Let me know what's missing. Let me know what else I should be including. And she gave me a great long list of all the things that this MVP should have. And it was up to me to decide, okay, none of this makes sense for now. Great ideas. But it did catch a couple things, like a gallery feature I didn't have in there. But it makes sense to increase the ethos of the platform. And then it had some suggestions around sensitive data because it is a ABA platform or a website for an ABA center, and so considering HIPAA and PII requirements. So I said, okay, you did come up with some good ideas that I was not considering. Took those, added them to my document, and the rest of it will be considered backlog if and when the client decides they want to add more to the website that I built for them. So yeah, I think I've done enough chit chatting. I do want to walk you through these examples because I think it's important to be able to see it for yourselves and understand, just to demystify essentially what all of this is. So I'll share my screen and then walk you through this process that I went through. I have way too many screens open. Yes, I do. Do not judge me for it because it's not my fault. It's just how my brain works. Okay. So the client, who I mentioned is my mother. She has opened an adult day center in the Prince William County area for individuals with autism and other neurodivergent needs. So the first thing that I did, you can see here, is start to brainstorm on a whiteboard. Now, I don't have a physical whiteboard, which I still prefer, but I do have a virtual whiteboard. Shout out to Microsoft for that. And so this was really quick. It can be much more detailed than this. Maybe someday I'll show you the original Rialto user flows, and the number of user flows we had. But for this, it was pretty quick. It's essentially 3 steps. And notice that because I was talking to her on the phone, for about like 10 minutes as I was doing this, just to make sure I understand the user journey. This is the user experience for a potential client. So the first thing she mentioned was they should be able to make inquiries. So to be able to show interest in having their loved one attend the center. So step one, great. And those inquiries should go to their general email box. Lovely. And then the next step for them is scheduling a tour. However, for me, that felt more than MVP, right? Could I have taken the time to, in the platform, give them a way to respond to inquiries, send emails, schedule a tour? Yes, potential. Yes, I could have. But that would have taken more effort and more time. And quite frankly, given their demographic, they're more comfortable with reaching out via email or reaching out via phone, doing that offline, and then coming back to the platform. Fine. So um, she specified that she had two different forms already that she was using, PDF files. And so I made note of what those forms were and um, the fact that they were the inquiry, like they made up the inquiry form. And then the next step was set up a tour. The setup of the tour piece was offline. But then the next piece that they wanted was after the tour was set up, if the client wanted to move forward, then an application form needed to be sent. But that one is a has sensitive data and sensitive information, so it needs to be sent through like an encrypted private link and cannot be posted publicly to the website. So then the client will fill out the form, and then everything else basically happens offline. They'll go to the center, they'll finish. There's other forms that need to be filled out, but their preference was that it's done on paper and not electronically. Hey, that's their business, not my own. And so this is essentially the full user's journey. Once they get the form, they set up a date, and then they move forward from there. The website has done its job. So as you can see, not super complicated for this kind of website. Um, this is the document that I then created after having this conversation. I said, okay, now it's time to. Oh, I already have it open. Just kidding. Now it's time to what we need to do. So some of the things that I knew content wise Lovable would ask for, I just preemptively put it into this document. One piece is all of the contact information, like the official contact information. So I wanted to make sure that it had what it needed for that. Um, I knew what I wanted to be on the about page. If I hadn't put anything, Lovable probably would have generated like, put a story up or asked me more details to be able to fill out that page. But I knew exactly what I wanted it to, like the kind of story I wanted to tell. This I did in ChatGPT. It helped me flesh it out. And so we have the about page, and then they had done a photo shoot. Honestly, I think it was like a year ago. And so I wanted to make sure that we used some of those pictures from the photo shoot. So I picked one of them. And then the gallery feature that I mentioned earlier that ChatGPT reminded me of, I picked a few more to put into the gallery. I wanted to provide comparables. So other organizations that are doing similar things in the Northern Virginia area, just so that Lovable had a couple of verified organizations to be able to compare to. And then I wrote down some key functionality. Now, if this was a PRD that I was writing and giving to human developers, this would not be nearly enough. There's way too much room for interpretation, misinterpretation, and all of that. But Lovable does a pretty good job of staying as close to true north as possible. So the first thing that I described is this website is primarily informational. My mom has a document that she's used to talk about the center for a while. And so luckily for me, I didn't need to gather this information and collect it or put it into the Lovable document. I just told Lovable to refer to it. I literally uploaded this brochure into Lovable along with this document as well. And so I said essentially refer to this brochure. That's the information that needs to be displayed on this website in an easy to digest and user friendly way, because that brochure isn't quite. Then you want to give prospective clients the ability to submit inquiries managed by the GF admin, the Gregory and Friends address. They should be able to respond to inquiries by mail. So basically, once an inquiry is submitted, they should be able to respond by mail to that inquiry. And then those two documents that I had mentioned from the whiteboard exercise, I also uploaded those and said, use those files for the foundation of the inquiry form. Essentially, both of the files had a lot of the same fields. And so I just wanted Lovable to take all of the unique fields, put that together into one inquiry form. Um, and then I wanted to specify what was out of scope. So I mentioned prospective clients that have submitted inquiries. The team will reach out to them. They'll schedule a tour. All of that's handled offline. And then afterwards, the team should be able to send a private file for the client to complete. And this private file is that application form that I mentioned. And I said that it needs to be sent through DocuSign or something similar, just to ensure that it understands the level of privacy, encryption, data security that that particular file requires. And then I also mentioned that it must be HIPAA compliant. Um, and so, and then the last thing here I mentioned with branding, the client, the brochure that I showed you has a very specific brand that she wanted to use already. Wanted to keep the logo, wanted to keep the colors, and so I just wanted to relay that to Lovable. So making sure that they use the brand of Gregory, the brochure, the color scheme, all of that. Wanted to continue to use that. So uh, yeah, I mentioned color scheme, the fonts, and then I mentioned the pictures that were taken during their photo shoot about a year ago. So I took all of that, like I mentioned, took it to ChatGPT. While it flushed out all of the extra stuff that I may not have included in this document, what it also did was give me the exact prompt that I needed to copy and paste into Lovable. So took that prompt, downloaded this document as a PDF, included this brochure, as well as the three other forms, the application form, the intake form, and the other intake form, basically. Added that as an attachment, and then let Lovable do its thing. Now, I cannot remember if I did this in the part one of this video, so I'm gonna do it here really quickly. Apologies if it's a repeat. I'll show you, this is essentially what Lovable spit out after that, after those four or five documents plus the prompt. What I did afterwards was spend, I don't know, maybe this took maybe 5 or 10 credits for the initial spit out. And I think I'm at 40 credits total in getting specifics done. And so it did a pretty good job from a branding perspective. Does it look fairly, I don't know, generic, maybe even generative AI ish? Maybe, probably. But what it definitely does do is give credibility. And so, request a tour. This is the inquiry form that I mentioned. Broke that down into 4 different subsections. When you submit that, it goes to the admin team. There's a way for the staff to log in. It's not a big proponent of the website, as you can notice, because it's not a big part, like it's not the primary user. The primary user are people looking for day support centers for their loved ones. The about section that I mentioned, being able to have a page that shows that this is not just a cookie cutter business, right? It's a business created based on a need, and then being able to meet that need. So yeah, this was pretty cool, but also pretty straightforward implementation. I have used Lovable for this is Rialto. Hold on, there's a plane flying overhead. I live 20 minutes away from an airport. I think I mentioned that earlier. It just be noisy. This was a much larger effort, um, larger in that there were in the pre-work, right? There are more users to consider, there are more journeys to consider, there are more problems and more outcomes to consider. Much larger effort from that standpoint. In the development, this is the platform that I mentioned. I took 3 years to build initially with developers, and now this took me about 20 days, 20 development days. The way Lovable works, if you're on the free plan, which I was for this, you get 5 credits a day for 6 days, so 30 credits a month. Um, and I worked on it for about like 2 months. December, by end of January, I had it up and running and people using it. I continue to tweak it, here and there, build additional features or what have you based on how people are using the platform. But for the most part, it was able to do a whole lot. Um, there's a custom assessment for founders to be able to understand where they are early stage. There's a pricing page for organizations, ESOs that work with founders and want to be able to use the same platform. What we're trying to do makes sense. So you can list it here, and get people to take your survey and give you feedback. So I mentioned this to say I have tested Lovable with different levels of complexity when it comes to building. This one has a Stripe integration, where people can spend money, and so does this one. So Savvy, this one's a marketplace, a two-sided marketplace. Um, I'm collecting tailors that are in Nigeria on one side, and then collecting clients that are abroad that are looking for Nigerian tailors on the other side. So two-sided marketplace, community platform, and then a small business website. Done it all on Lovable. So I'll be really excited to share with you, or continue to share with you how to do all of this, and doing it live. I wanted to show you the Abroad Impact website. I'll refresh it right now so that you can see there's absolutely nothing built. I'm a little nervous about this because I think Abroad Impact will be the hardest build I've done on Lovable, and doing it in front of y'all, um, with nothing prepared. I don't have a single diagram drawn. I don't have a single document written. I don't have a single line of code, a chat prompt done. We're doing it together. And so my hope is that you can see the process live and get a better understanding of what it all entails. So that is all I have for you all today. Let me just do a little quickie looky look over my notes. Yeah, I talked about that. I said this is the exact process I use whether I'm building a SaaS product or a founder platform. I, I happen to use Lovable because it is the tool that I'm just most interested in. Yep, I won't say no. There are other platforms. I think Base 44 is one. Cloud Code does a lot of stuff. There's a few out there. Works for me. I love. Okay, so I think that's it for today. In the next episode, we'll talk about AI, but I also just want to kind of get into things. I don't really like to do a big workup before we get there. I also plan on bringing one of my founders that I have helped build their platform in Lovable. I kind of did the base work, got them going, and she's been tweaking it ever since. And so, just as an opportunity to see that, people from all walks of life can use this to bring their dreams and ideas to fruition. So, that is all for today. If you need me, you know where to find me, and leave in the comments if this was helpful, if you have questions, if you have concerns. And definitely check out the referral codes that I have. I think I have one for Lovable. If you want to join the Hustle Forward Network, where we meet monthly and hold ourselves accountable to the things that we're doing, definitely sign up there. I saw a service provider trying to try and sign up after our my live stream last week. I do not yet have a place for you on the platform, but don't worry, that's coming soon. After I use these credits to build AIC, that'll probably be the next big project that I work on. A way for service providers to support the businesses that are on the platform. So, if you have any questions or any thoughts or opinions on what that should look like, definitely let me know. Alrighty, until next time, I will talk to you soon.